Boom, we're back. Squeeze the Neck podcast. My old mate, my coach, Frank Gilfeather. Thanks for doing this, man.
Good to see you, Ollie.
Always great to see you, man. We keep bumping into each other, don't we? Glasgow, or near Glasgow.
No.
London, I saw you.
Yes.
And now we're in your place of Aberdeen.
So, I think you're stalking me, Ollie.
There you go. Might be, but don't tell anyone. All right. But we are real fighters today. Up in Aberdeen is the name of the gym. So thanks for the guys for having us down. We're going to get some training in after, which I'm excited about. But before we do, one of the reasons I wanted to come back and sit down and talk to you again was last time we got into like you and your story and whatnot, but we touched on a few sort of like historical old school fighters. Yeah. So I wanted to come back and sit down with you and go sort of deeper into that. And we'll see how we get on, mate. But the one that comes up a lot is Rocky Marciano and Sugar Ray Robinson, which we'll get into. But before we do, as I say, thank you very much for doing this.
You're welcome.
Always great to see you.
Thank you.
Let's jump in, shall we? We'll get into what you're doing because you're everywhere now on Instagram as well, right? So I see you every day. It feels like I see you every day. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, Rocky Marciano we got to last time. So we picked this straight back up, I think, from where we was before. We spoke a bit and we jumped around to different things. But obviously before my time, Rocky Marciano, I'm a massive fan. I don't think he gets enough appreciation for what he did in the ring. And I've heard you say as well, I won't put words in your mouth, but I've heard you speak about Sugar Ray Robinson as you think is the greatest pound for pound of all time, which we'll get into. But
I do.
Let's get into Rocky Marciano, mate. Tell me your opinion on the man.
Well, Marciano was an unusual guy in that he didn't start boxing until he was relatively older. You know, he didn't come up through the youth ranks. He just, he didn't have that many amateur fights either. Yeah. But the great thing about him was, we go on about this a lot, but he was a small heavyweight in terms of his height. But what you've got to remember is, in those days, heavyweights were lucky to weigh 14 stone. Right. 14 and a half stone. He was about 5'10 and a half. He was roughly about the same height as Mike Tyson. But Marciano's big disadvantage was he had very short arms. Yeah. And therefore, he had no other way to box other than to get close. A bit like Tyson, but in a different style. So if you look at his fights online, Marciano took unbelievable punishment en route to getting close enough. He knew that when he got close enough, he would do the damage he needed to do. And so this was the great thing about him. But I think you're right when you said that he doesn't get the appreciation I think he deserves. And the reason I say that is because he did have a brain. You know, he was a slugger, but he wasn't just a slugger. He knew that because of the disadvantage in his height, he had to get close and he would hit you anywhere. I mean, there was a great story about a guy he boxed called Roland Lastarza, who was a taller, more of a boxer. And he hit Lastarza so often in the arms in an attempt to bring the guard down that at the end of the fight, I think Lastarza had 13 burst blood vessels in his arms because he just kept whacking his arms until they dropped. And then he was... But, he had that apart. He didn't have a jab. All he had were the body punches and the hooks and the uppercuts, all the stuff you need when you're close in. So 49 fights, undefeated, and decides, I'll call it a day. I think that was very wise. Years later, of course, what we saw were the giants of the heavyweights coming in, long before his time. But, good for him. I wouldn't say he was an all-time great, but you've got to put him, in the frame when it comes to heavyweight champions who excelled despite their disadvantages.
And there's something to be said about someone who always finds a way to win as well, isn't there? Do you know what I mean? And it's interesting, because I used to watch a lot of Rocky Marciano back in the day. He had the same amateur record as me, and that's my claim to fame. I'll take that one. But you're right, he only had 12 amateur bouts. Do you know what I mean? So it was like, he started, I believe, like you said, I think he was 20 when he started, when he in the army or something like that. Something like crazy, which is like to go on and do what he did was insane. But also, retiring undefeated. Listen, if you go on long enough, everyone will lose, right? So he found a way to get out at the right time as well. But if you watch his training, which fascinates me, I know you've seen it as well, is when you watch some of his training clips, there's nothing slick. Like if you look at someone like Mayweather on the pads doing all this slick stuff, moving, there was none of that. If you see some of his training clips, he's literally stood in front of the bag with his nose on the bag.
That's right.
Big haymaker here. And it's almost like you look at it first and it's almost like a bit of a joke, isn't it? You're like, how's this guy ever box sort of thing? But then you watch it a bit more and you kind of for me, the penny drops a little bit. It's like it's about hard work and getting close and doing the damage, isn't it?
That's an interesting point. You know why? Because, and I've got a kind of a mild criticism today of the way coaches coach and boxers respond to that coaching. And what I'm getting at is the pads. It's like all choreographed, bang, 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 and the coach is saying, right, what I'm going to do now is you're going to do this, and you're going to throw that, and they go bang, bang, and it looks incredibly impressive. Hand speed, bit of power, and you think, hang on, that's not what happens in the real world. You know, your opponent doesn't say to you, right, okay, do this, bang, 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 hit me on it, do that. You know, it's all this kind of stuff that's going on. I think, let's concentrate more on the technique rather than the choreographed stuff where, you know, where it looks good, it's impressive, but it's not the real world.
No.
And that's, so you make an interesting comparison there when you speak about Marciano. He went in there, and his big thing was about brute strength and about breaking his opponents down. As you said, you put it quite rightly, he found a way to win. That was his style. That's all he knew. And so he had to be the best he could be at that style.
Right.
So there was none of this stuff. Of course, we didn't have pads in those days.
Right, they say that. People didn't have pads, yeah.
Nothing. That didn't exist.
No.
It was bag mitts. Keep going on about bag mitts. It was bag mitts, heavy bag, and it was sheer effort and energy that you put into every session. That was always the case with these fighters. You know, okay, things changed. We got the pads, we got the paddles, and it looks brilliant. But you cannot replace the way he did it and the others did it. The big punching on the bag, the speed, the power, the effort, the energy, the sparring, and that's the all-important thing. You can't replace those things.
No, and that's the thing. That's an interesting point, because a lot of people nowadays, like, there's some people that like the idea of not sparring hard anymore, which to me is craziness. Like, how can you get away with that? You got to spar, aren't you? Like, the first time you get punched can't be live, and it's time to fight. You have to spar.
Yeah. And that's where you know, somebody took me to task the other day. I made a video which said, don't take into the ring, sparring, something that you haven't practiced 1,000 times before you go in there. And somebody said, well, that's where you go and learn. No, that's where you go and get a sore face if you haven't practiced it.
Exactly,
you know? So get it right before you... It's like a dress rehearsal in anything. You know, you get it right, and then you take it in on the night, whether it's sparring or in a fight proper. I think I look back at these old fighters, and I don't want to be described as some old fuddy-duddy who thinks it's not as good now today. I don't want to be seen as that guy, but I want people to recognise these guys did it differently. Some might say better in terms of their preparation. And the hard sparring, there's a lot of debate over that, you know.
Yeah, but it's interesting. It's an interesting thing, and we all know people that have done too much sparring, and they're not sitting here having a conversation like me and you are now, right? They're stumbling over their words.
You're right.
So there's the other side of it too. But to me, like, if you can only do one aspect of boxing, it ain't gonna be pads, is it? You're gonna have to spar, right? It's as simple as that to me. Like, how would you get away with that? I don't really understand it. No. But when you said about the pads as well, I saw a video. I don't know. Maybe you posted it actually. Someone posted a video recently of Roy Jones hitting pads. And it's not like a 6 million shot combination. He throws like an uppercut, steps, hook, steps. I might be getting a bit off, but he's throwing like a basic, like what he will throw in a fight. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah. And he seemed to do all right, old Roy.
Didn't he?
Back in his day.
But you're right. You know, why kind of try to, why change it? I'm trying to think of an analogy. I can't at the minute. But why would you try to do something that you're not going to do in a contest? You know, you're never going to get the chance to fire 6, 7 punches in these fantastic... Okay, it's great for your fitness, it's great for your reflexes, your hand-eye coordination, all that. But nothing beats sparring. And if you're not going out... I've been at gyms where they've said, right, you're doing 60% sparring today. And you think, how do you work that one out? You know, you go in there and you spar. You don't take liberties. That's the key thing, you know, for me. you're not one of these guys who's extremely experienced, maybe even heavier than your sparring partner, much better. You don't take advantage of that.
Right.
You've got to do like for like.
Yeah,
You've watched guys like, we've watched videos of like Duran sparring and these guys, you know, and the great middleweights of the 80s, and you think, that's the way it should be done.
Yeah, Duran's a great example. There's a famous video of him sparring with Nigel Benn. You've seen that one, right? Where he's just like he's like silk, and he's slipping and a slide, and he's like his reputation is rough and tumble. But in sparring, he's like slipping, sliding, shooters. You like it. It's brilliant to watch. If anyone gets a chance, watch that one.
Yeah.
But if you see, I tell you the thing that I notice with people with sparring as well, and training in general, is like when people are sparring, they'll sort of not respect what's going on, if that makes sense. So they'll outspeed somebody when it's like we're trying to work on something. So that kind of 60% sparring to me doesn't work, because as soon as you start to see someone get on top, the other person goes faster, and then it's just before you know it, they're sparring anyway. So for my money, you're better off just sparring in the first place, right? Why bother?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I agree with that. Sparring is so crucial, and I think it's been downplayed so much these days. You know, I've had comments, for example, when I do stuff on the back. And people have said to me, why are you punching so hard? Why don't you just pull back? The simple answer is, I don't know how. Because that is the way we were brought out. When you go and you punch the bag, speed and power every time. You don't go, I'm going to be half-hearted. Honest to God. I'm in the gym with 16, 17, 18-year-old boys, and they're on the bag next to me, and they're going, bang, 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 bang. And it frustrates the hell out of me. And I've annoyed a lot of kids by saying, hang on, I'm 80, you're 17, why am I putting more into my experience in the gym than you are? It's just like, oh, let's play at it, you know. So we were always told, my dad always said to me, if you're not going to do things properly, just don't do them. And boxing is too dangerous a place, the ring is too dangerous a place to be unprepared.
Yeah, definitely.
So if you're on the bag, you've got 3 minutes, or if you're younger, 2 minutes, and you go for those 2 minutes. I mean, you're not fighting for 2 minutes, but you're boxing, you're thinking, you're moving, you're everything. It's all part of the equation. So, that goes alongside the soft sparring thing. Do we go to soft sparring? Is it useful? Not sure.
Well, I agree actually, and there's a time and a place for different things, like you say, like the reflexes and all that kind of stuff. But I do think as well, people train wrong a lot of the time. Like, for example, I hear people a lot, and I'm sure you come across it, they go, I train 3 hours and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, if you watch what they're doing, it is like the bang, 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 bang. It's like, you could have trained for 45 minutes hard, right? And cut all the fat off the bone and all the nonsense. Like Bernard Hopkins spoke about that when he was getting older in his career. I'll butcher what he said, but like it was something along the lines of, he realised a fight's 36 minutes, right? With the breaks, it's 45 minutes. Like get in there and train for that versus like training for 3 hours and running and You're just beating your body down at a certain point, aren't you? Because we've all done it massively. Everyone that's ever boxed, I would argue, has done it where they've trained too much and you're flat and you've had that feeling, whether it's actually in a real fight or it's just sparring, when you stood in front of someone and you're like, oh, this is not going well today. You know what I mean? Things aren't working. And
lots of it is meaningless. When you go to the gym, you see these guys and think, why didn't you just stay at home tonight?
Have the day off today.
But you get lots of guys who are obsessed, and they're training out their skin, night after night. And I said it to one young boxer. I said, please be aware that you could become stale.
Right.
And they had no idea what I was talking about. Stale? What do you mean? Well, psychologically, you think, oh, this is becoming a chore. Now, I think when things become a chore, you've got to take a week off.
Right.
You know?
Good advice,
say, okay, I'm going to reset now, and after that week, you're missing the gym again. So when you get back, you're re-enthused, you're reinvigorated, and you go again. I think there's nothing worse, and it's certainly in the amateurs, many of the amateurs, nothing worse than training every day or every second day or whenever you do it and not getting a fight at the end of it.
Oh, and it happens a lot, doesn't it? You turn up on shows and no one's there. You're like, okay, cool, not boxing tonight then.
That's
Made
right.
weight, done all this right,
Yeah.
nothing.
And I remember, I'll tell you a story. I remember once in a gym I was doing some coaching at, and there was a couple of guys that were about 13 or 14, and they were on the bag together, you know. And I went up and I said, look, here's a tip for you. Let's try and do it this way. And they looked, and what they look at is the white hair, an old guy, you know, what does he know? Because that's going on in their minds. I know that. I appreciate that. Yeah. And one of them said to me, did you box? I said, yeah. How many fights did you have? And I said, now these guys had never boxed, right? But they were in the gym. I said, roughly 200. And they went, yeah. Like,
Thought you were joking.
You liar.
Yeah.
And I said, you know, and so I had to explain. I don't know why I had that bothered, but you have to explain. So in the days when I boxed amateur, you were boxing every other week.
Right.
You boxed and when you boxed in the district championships, the national championships, the ABAs, so on, not so much the ABAs because that was spaced out a bit, but in the district and the national championships, you boxed 3 times in the one night.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
If you were in the
Multiple times.
final, if you got to the final. Because everything was done, and it was another weight division to be decided that night. So you had bits of a break, not much. And now they're doing it over 2 weekends or 3 weekends and so on, which is fine. That's great. I mean, it's a bit brutal in my day when you had to do 3 in a one night. But that's how you built up your experience.
Right.
And that's how you built up the numbers that you have, like my 200.
Yeah, yeah.
And so you were training constantly, but also you were boxing constantly.
Right.
So that was what kind of drove you on, you know, the fact that you had a fight at the end of it.
Yeah, and that's, psychologically, that's tough to deal with 3 in a night, isn't it, if you keep winning? Like, three bouts. And I think in my time, they'd shortened it. I think just before my first actual season of boxing, they'd changed it. You couldn't go 3 times in a day. You was limited to twice.
Yeah.
But still, it's one of them deals.
But Ollie, you're saying in a day.
In a day.
We had to do it between 7:30 in the evening and whatever time it was, 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Right, so you would have, in my case, it was the lightweights, and earlier it was the featherweights, and you would have the welterweights boxing that night off as well. So they had, the way they divvied it up, you know, you had a bit of respite. Although in the featherweights, I remember my first senior featherweight championships in Scotland, there was a guy called Evan Armstrong who became the British professional featherweight champion.
Okay.
Lovely guy from Ayrshire, and he was a big puncher. And so I just turned 17, and we're boxing in the featherweights, and the light middleweights are on at the same time, right? So one ring, by the way, this is not kind of side by side. And there was a guy in the light middleweights, there was a guy called Andy Wiper, who was a mega puncher. He was actually like a light middleweight Mike Tyson in his style. Great puncher. So he's knocking out everybody in the light middleweights and stopping them. Evan Armstrong's stopping everybody in my weight division. And what I found was I did my semi-final against a guy called Jim Gibson, not Jimmy Gibson, not the golden boy Jimmy Gibson that was around at the time, but also from Fife. Lovely guy. And Jimmy was a tough hombre. Like it would be the elbows and everything going. So I boxed him in the semi-finals, and I beat him on points. I come out, Andy Wiper's boxing next in the semi-finals for the light middleweights. Evan Armstrong does semi, and they're knocking it. So I just get sitting down like this, and somebody walks in and said, "Right, Gilfeather, time for the final." And I'm going, "What? I've just come out. Give us a break." Against this guy who's nearly killed me. So that was the difference. You just had to find that in yourself to kind of get through it. You know.
Yeah. And with training like that, how often are you training back? Like in your heyday, when it was like, what was commonplace to train as an amateur boxer back then?
I would do 5 nights. Well, 4 nights on a Sunday.
Yeah. Wow.
and you would miss out on this Saturday. This was when I was going good guns, you know. And then at weekends, I would sometimes go and spar with Walter McGowan, who was the flyweight champion of the world. This started when I was 15. I was boxing in a tournament in Fife, and McGowan was there as a professional, and he was becoming a star. And he would come and he did an exhibition with sparring, right? Doing the crowd thing. Wow. So I went in, fought this guy, and it was fine. Came out, and McGowan's father/coach, a guy called Joe Gans, said to me, did well there, and I said, thanks very much. I was kind of in awe of McGowan, because he was such a wonderful mover, great balance and so on. And Joe Gans said to me, would you give Walter a couple of rounds later when he goes in for the sparring? I said, yeah, sure. So we did that. And then on and after that, Gans would call my trainer and say, can we get Frank down this weekend? Or would he come for a week training for the World Flyweight Championship against Salvatore Baruni at Wembley Arena, 1966? Yeah, come down. So I was with him almost from the age of 15 until whatever, 19, 20. But what I found was I was going down to Hamilton, where he is, outside Glasgow, training, and then guys like, if Joe Gans turned his back and went into the changing room to see the Walter, his son, then it was a guy like Bobby Fischer, who was a leading contender for the British featherweight title, professional. I was only 16. And Fischer would say to me, fancy a couple of, yeah, okay, we'll go a couple of rounds. I remember once Joe Gans came out of the changing room, saw me in with Fischer and went crazy to Fischer. What do you think you're doing?
Right.
You know,
right.
He's only a kid, yeah. But I think basically what he was saying was, I've brought him down. I paid his petrol with his coach, and he never got any payment. So you don't muscle in on my territory.
Yeah, he's with me, yeah.
And having said that, he said one weekend, he said, we're going up to Newark Hill outside Motherwell. I said, why? Well, we're going to spar with Johnny Morrissey. Johnny Morrissey was preparing to box for the British Bantamweight Championship, professional. Fine. 16.
It's unbelievable, isn't it? As a kid, and it's 16.
But my trainer once said to McGowan's father, why are you bringing Frank down? He said, because he's the only guy who can make Walter think. You know, Walter was going in with lightweights, light welterweights, and he was banging all over them.
And was that because where he didn't have the physicality as much, he was more switched on boxing-wise, and you was keeping him on his toes that way?
I wouldn't, I wouldn't engage unless it suited me.
Right.
But of course, he was the world champion.
And aside from that, 16 compared to a grown man's a massive deal anyway, isn't it? That's to be in there sparring properly with a grown man at 16 is it is. It's a feat in
itself. That's what we found too, Ollie, when we went abroad to the Eastern European countries, where there is no professional boxing.
Right.
So what you got was the leading amateurs in a country, for example, like Bulgaria or Romania, Poland, where there was thousands of amateur boxers. So the leading ones were guys, they had nowhere to go in terms of turning professional, so they stayed and they became, the best ones became what they called masters of sport.
Right.
In other words, they were full-time.
Right.
So they'd be in the army. One guy I boxed in Bulgaria was a major in the army. And he said, I was 18, and he'd be about 27. And he said, what preparations have you guys done? I said, finish work, have something to eat, go to the gym every night. I said, what did you do? He said, 6 weeks in the mountains, training camp.
Right.
That was the difference. No professionals, they had nowhere to go, so they remained amateurs, of course. And they all became, it was harder to win a European title, amateur title, than it was an Olympic title.
Yeah. Well, top-level amateurs, like, when you see a top-level amateur, I mean, the obvious when they turn pro and they start knocking people over quick and they get to the top quick, but a top-level amateur, this is a serious athlete, isn't it? You know what I mean? It's not really amateur. Like the name is a bit deceptive, isn't it? Because a lot of these guys, especially if you're on Team GB and things like that, you're pretty much full time now, aren't you? You know what I mean?
Well, that's a change. You know, it didn't happen in my day, but now when the lottery came along and the lottery money was available and they were throwing money at. But here's an interesting point. So they're throwing money at the amateur organisations like England Boxing or Boxing Scotland, and lots of money, and there are people involved in those organisations who are taking very good salaries out of it. And I'm saying, where are our Olympic champions? Where are our Olympic medalists now? We don't have them.
Right.
No, I think in the World Amateur Championships in Liverpool last year, England were 9th in the table.
Is that right? 9th?
Yeah.
Man.
And many of those medalists that were representing England were women.
Yeah, that's right. Chantel Reed, shout out Chantel. She's a friend of the podcast. She's been on the podcast, gold medal. She
Chantel,
got gold. Yeah.
You're brilliant.
Episode 2, Chantel. We'll figure it out.
and so you're thinking, okay, has the money made any difference?
Right.
No.
Right. I wonder, it's tricky now because where like social media and things like that, I think there's a lot of countries that have now got access to more, right? Whether that's money or just knowledge. You know what I mean? Like before, I'm assuming if you went back to like when you was boxing as an amateur, you didn't have a lot of idea how the Bulgarians were training or the Russian, right? It was just you turn up at a tournament and you'd see the guys that whatever was on the team and did your best.
You had no idea. When I went to Bulgaria, we boxed in the capital, Sofia, and it was in a football stadium. And we came in and lined up against the ropes, right? So the Scottish team are facing the Bulgarian team. This is to be announced. And what used to happen is you say, okay, the flyweight is so-and-so, and the flyweight for Scotland is John McCluskey. They would walk into the centre of the ring, shake hands, and change over. So that at the end of the introductions, the Scotland team is on the other side of the ring, and the Bulgarians were there. So we're kind of shuffling up there, lining up. And I look over at this guy who's opposite me, and I thought, this is a mistake. He's a proper athlete. I'm 18, you know, and I'm looking at him, and he's tall, and he's lithe, and I thought. So I looked up the line, our line, and looked at Andy Peace, who was the welterweight, and Tom Imrie, who was the ABA champion at light middleweight. And I said, Andy, Tom, I said, I think I might have your guy. And they're going, what? No, this is my... And I said, no, that can't be. You know, and eventually the guy said to me, are you Gilfeather? And I said, yeah. He said, I'm Pilachev. I'm boxing you. A couple of years later, he was a European silver medalist.
Was he? Yeah.
He was the major in the army. And I went, blooming heck, you know, I'm boxing you, you know. Well, he beat me on points, but then I let them learn quickly. The only guy that won that day was Ken Buchanan in the featherweights division below me. And so the next couple of days later, you box on a Thursday when you're abroad, and then you box on the Saturday. We went to Plovdiv, which is Bulgaria's second city.
Okay.
And this time, only 2-1, me and Buchanan, because I'd learned a bit from boxing. It's a different style. The Eastern Europeans are all this kind of... You look at Bivol, he's still
does
he's
it like
immersed
that,
in that, you know. But you have to find a way. And so I boxed the number 2 in Bulgaria, and I beat him. But that's the thing. You know, we were just kids. And we're looking at these Eastern Europeans. And then in later life, I'm thinking, why on earth did the Scottish Amateur Boxing Association always bring the Romanians, the Poles, the Hungarians, you know, if you're boxing them, think, oh, thanks very much.
Yeah, well, it's funny, I've heard that before with a friend of mine who was boxed for England, and he said he was at a tournament, I forget what it was, but he was coming up exactly the same scenario against I think he said the guy was from Turkey, and he was, you know, a youth sort of like bordering on seniors and whatnot, and he said the guy looked like he was like well, it's okay, I'm not boxing him, he's just there, you know what I mean? And then as time's going on, he's going like, hang on a minute, like, and the penny's dropped and he did end up boxing him. He said, but he was terrified because he looked like a grown man, you know? But it is what it is, isn't it, at the end of the day? You're at these tournaments. I even on a club show once when I was 18, I boxed a 34-year-old. And I remember looking across and he was, you know, he'd weighed in 3 kilos heavier and he had, it's a club show, so you just whatever, right? He had like tattoos everywhere and like a man, do you know what I mean?
Sure.
You're looking at him and you're going like,
yeah.
I ain't boxing him, am I? You know what I mean? And you end up, you are boxing him. Lost on a split decision, I'll call it a robbery. If you were there, you tell me. But no, like jokes aside, like when you're in that ring sometimes, when you see these things at tournaments, people are about to get into the ring.
Yeah.
You've done the work, haven't you? Do you know what I mean? It's time to go. And that comes back to like what we were saying earlier about the training and whatnot with the old school guys. Because back in the day, and you'll know this better than me, but you look at these old historical fighters training, you Sugar Ray Robinsons, Sonny Liston's another one, like their training looks very basic, right? They're using the body weight a lot, they might be chopping trees, sometimes they're throwing balls against the wall and catching it and all kinds of like, but it just like when you see it nowadays, you see people doing clean and jerks and all kinds of specialist stuff in the gym. For me, when I watch that kind of stuff, the old school guys, I look at it and I go, that just seems right, doesn't it? You know what I mean? They seem like they're training to train like a human being to get another fight versus like numbers on a spreadsheet. You know what I mean? I
agree. I mean, I watch these videos like you online and I can see boxers training. They've got this ladder stuff that's going on the floor. They've got hoops, you know, in and out. And boxing's not like that.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The guy's saying, this is how to do your footwork. In there, out there, over there, into that hoop and into that hoop. No, it's not. You don't need all that stuff.
Yeah.
You need this.
Yeah.
And you need the coordination, obviously. But having a couple of circles on the floor or having a ladder painted off, that's not going to help your technique.
Right. And I'll tell you what I have a problem with as well. And I'm not dead set on this because I think there is a place too, but I have a hard time for someone training a fighter who's never fought. I find that difficult because I go, you've got an idea, you know what you're looking at, but you don't really know what that feels like because it like everything else aside, like you're going to be in a change room at one point and you're going, why'd I do this? Yeah. Right? That's a part of it. And if you've never felt that, you can only guess. And I go, you're missing a big element here. I don't know if you should be on the team. Do you see where I'm coming from?
No, listen, we're on the same page on that one because I've often, and here's the thing, you've got to be careful because lots of these coaches that the boxing fraternity calls PE teachers.
This is right,
lots of them, you know, lots of boxing clubs wouldn't exist without them.
Right.
Because they open it up, it's their club, they go to the meetings and all that stuff, and they offer a space to young people to come and train and keep fit. And that's important. Where it comes a difficulty, in my view, is when you see them in the corner.
Right.
Right. Now, I can't tell you how often I've seen this, where their boxers being blasted all over the place by an opponent. And what are they doing? They're outside the ring going like this to their boxer. Come on, attack. I'm thinking, the guy's bleeding like a sheep. You know, what you should be saying is get on your bike, protect yourself, you know. And here's the other thing. Here's the key thing, Ollie. Where is the teaching of defense? Right, so everything is about attack these days, in my view. So you go in there and go, go on, get in, come on, push forward, you know. Hang on, don't push forward. Your guy's getting battered all over the shop. You know, you don't want to tell him, he's coming out there and, you did well, you should have done this. No, just calm down. There's a thing that you should be doing, number one. Number one is how to clench a fist. I always say that, you know. But you should be taught how to defend, right? So I use the analogy, which is if you're a football team and you don't lose a goal, you can't lose the game.
Right.
Right. If you're a boxer and you don't take punches, you can't lose.
Right.
Now, if you put up a barrier, right, go on at this level, you watch it with the old fighters, all of them, even up, you know, Muhammad Ali and Thomas Hearns and all. Thomas Hearns didn't do too well in terms of preventing punches, but even Muhammad Ali, you know, stop it. Once you stop, you close the door, then you don't have a problem. Your opponent has a problem. He's thinking, hang on, that's my jab. It's hard, it's swift, it's got everything, but I can't get through. And so he's now got to rethink his strategy. If in fact you do have a strategy going out the ring, often your strategy goes out the window in the first 10 seconds because it all hinges on what your opponent wants to do as well, you know. And so I would love to see more trainers concentrate, certainly in the initial stages of a young boxer's career, on how to defend yourself. If you can defend yourself, then you can go on and begin to think about scoring punches. So that's a key thing for me. But these guys who open the clubs and they do a great job, and the amateur boxing world has to be grateful. But when it comes to technique, now listen, all of my stuff is about technique online. I'm very conscious that people should learn the right things, the right way to do things, right? And not just kind of be expected to go into a gym because they've watched a few videos and then they go, right, I'm a boxer now. You know, that's dangerous.
It is, yeah. I tell you what, you touched on it a bit there. Is like there's quite the numbers of people that actually are teachers now of boxing, right? Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of sort of people. And listen, in an amateur boxing club, you've got so many people. It's hard, right? But like if you're coaching someone, sometimes there's a difference between like a trainer and a teacher, right? Like when I remember, like when I was with you last time, like it wasn't like I wasn't laying on the floor shaking and sweating at the end of it, but my mind was going like a million miles an hour because it was like, teach, no, that's wrong, do this, whatever it was. And it's like you feel like you're actually upgraded versus I feel like a lot of people go in the gym sometimes, they get a great sweat on, they get fit, but and then it's like they still can't jab.
Well, that's nice of you to say so, because the whole point of what I do in terms of my seminars is to allow people to go away and think, oh, I learned a couple of things there tonight. And when I go back into the gym, I'll take them with me.
Right.
Now, the worst thing you can do is be taught something and think, well, that's good, and then go back to your old habits, you know, which are probably not serving you well. And that's what I always say, young boxers, you know, this is the proper way to do it, in my view. And if you do that, and I watch them, and they do it, but I could go to the other side of the room to coach another couple of boxers, come back, this guy's doing it the way did before.
Right.
And I remember one time being, and I'm not kidding, I must have told this guy about, over the course of 2 or 3 nights, must have told this guy about, I don't know, 14 times. And then I thought, why am I wasting my breath? I go there and I come back, you know, he's done it in front of me, and I think, brilliant, do it again, do it again, do it again, do it, right, go. Keep doing it. Go away, come back. Thinking, why am I bothering? You know, it's frustrating. You know,
it is hard though, because I remember again, like when I was with you before, there was a lot of people in the room, right? I remember you coming back to a guy once and you said, "I just showed you that 5 minutes ago. Like you're doing it the way you did it before," and you could see the confusion on his face. But like, and it's not his fault necessarily. I think there's a cultural thing, like in boxing gyms sometimes, and in all sports really, but certainly in boxing gyms where it's so hard, it's like you get tired and you go, oh, I'll just throw it away, I'll throw it. Do you know what I mean? Whereas there's the lack of teacher in the environment of going, no, stop, slow down, stop sweating, stop doing it a million miles an hour, and just do it right. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Well, and you're absolutely right. The thing is, you know, if you are not prepared to listen,
that's a big part of it. Yeah, that's a big part.
But you're not prepared to listen. You're letting it go in there, and because you're, I don't know, is it too harsh to say lazy? Because you're lazy, you want to do it your way, because it's too hard to do it the other way, the proper way.
Yeah, okay.
You don't want to be, I know I'm comfortable doing it. But you will become comfortable doing it my way eventually, and it'll become second nature. Now, when we learn anything, what do we want to do? We need to be practicing. And well, it's not comfortable for me. I don't feel right doing it. Yeah, but keep doing it. And eventually, oh, it's great. It's like pulling on an old pair of socks. You know, you think, and it's stuck up there. And so the whole ethos of this is pulling it out of your repertoire when you need it.
Right.
Guys like Sugar Ray Robinson, like, he had everything in there, so that instinctively he would know what to do in that moment, right? He would know. Now, you don't get it right all of the time, but most of the time because he's practiced it a million times. And he's featured it in sparring before and in contests. So it's there. This guy does that, right, well, what do I do? This is me being kind of pragmatic, but also you've got to realise everything's got to be done in the instant, in the moment. You don't have time to think, oh, he's going to do that, so I'll do that. It's got to be.
It's too late, right?
Yeah.
If you're thinking
Too
consciously,
late,
it's
you're
gone.
right.
It's too late. You're
Yeah.
behind. But how good was he, Sugar Ray Robinson?
Sugar Ray Robinson was, I mean, I've watched a million of his fights over and over again. When you consider his record, it's phenomenal, you know. And the long unbeaten run, I can't remember how much it was, 169 fights or something.
Something crazy, yeah.
And also because the guy was a beautiful athlete. He was so kind of rhythmic and fluid. He'd been a dancer, of course,
Right.
and, you know, in show business. And so he knew about the movements and all of that. One big thing that we tend to overlook with Sugar Ray Robinson was that he had a great chin. Now, I think all the champions, the truly great champions, have to have good chins. So that, you know, if you get down, you get back up again. And Sugar Ray just had this kind of marvellous fluidity about him, you know. He had every punch in the book. And he had a great reach. He had fabulous footwork. He was slim, really, as a middleweight, but he could punch and he could hurt you. But the chin was also a key element of his boxing. You know, he fought some fabulous fights, you know, and Carmen Basilio, the 2 fights there. I think that was the first fight was the fight of the year in Time magazine, 1957, I think, right about there. And you're looking at these guys, think, these are wonderful guys. And you know, I was in London last week, and I went into the National Portrait Gallery, and I saw a portrait of Len Harvey, who was a great British light heavyweight champion. And I read the blurb on it, and it said that when he fought, I can't remember, John McAvoy or something, 90,000 people came to see it.
That's
Now,
mad,
we're
isn't it?
talking about decades and decades ago. And people are thinking today, oh yeah, Wembley, 90,000. That was happening.
Yeah.
You know, it was happening in, you know, when Jack Johnson fought in Cuba against Jess Willard, when Jack Dempsey was boxing. It was not uncommon for 100,000 people to be there in an outdoor arena. Obviously, didn't have the big arenas they do
They
now.
built some of them, didn't they? I think was it the Jack Johnson or Jack Dempsey fight? They actually built an arena for it, didn't they?
Yeah,
for a particular fight.
It was a Jack Dempsey one,
Jack Dempsey,
I think.
right?
Yeah.
It was the first $1 million gate or whatever
Yes,
it was.
that's right.
Yeah.
And so Dempsey, you know, these old guys they did it differently. All right, they weren't. We look at them now, and you've got young boxers coming up who'd never heard of these fighters. They'd be looking at their training videos and their boxing videos, and saying, "Oh, they're pretty primitive."
Yeah.
And sure, from a technical point of view, they were primitive, but they were durable. They were, you know, they could punch.
Yeah.
If they hit you, you knew about it, you know.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, we can't just throw out the baby with the water. You know,
Yeah.
you've got to remember that this is an evolutionary thing that's happening. However, people like me might argue, I would argue, that the evolution has kind of stuck somewhere along the way. Now, what we're seeing are different styles, which is fine, but what we're seeing is the diminishing of boxing technique. In my view, it's all about everybody speaks now. What round do you think he'll knock out so-and-so? No, I don't know. Who's to say that he's going to knock him out? Why? You know, what's happened to the points wins? And I guess they're becoming fewer and fewer because pro boxers now stand toe to toe, and they just unleash. And I think to myself, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to come out there and realise that you've just had 7 million brain cells destroyed, you know, and that maybe only 5 million will grow back in again. So you've got to think about these things, you know. You've got to come out the other end and think, well, that was a tough fight, but I didn't take too much.
Right.
Once
You can live to fight another day as well, can't you? You know,
exactly.
I don't think you should have that mentality when you're in the ring, like as the fighter, right? You got to fight till the bitter end, however bitter that end may be.
I agree with that. But what I'm saying is, you've now got two boxers in the centre of the ring, generally speaking.
Yeah.
And they're trading blows, right? And they're trying to slip. But the technique.
The art of it's gone, you're saying.
Gone.
Yeah.
Right.
It's interesting you say that. Like Sugar Ray Robinson's a great example of that. And you watch these old videos of him training, even forget the fights, just watching him training.
Yeah.
He's like silk going across the ring, isn't he? You know what I mean? It's interesting. And you say about like Jack Dempsey, like that back then. It's a hard life he's got as well. Because I think his only time in his career he got knocked out, he hadn't eaten for 3 days.
Yes.
Like fighting at top level. You imagine that now, like as a nutritionist has given him 6 meals a day and all that kind of stuff, right? Where it's like even just getting to the ring for him out of necessity is. You're dealing with a completely different sport, aren't you? You can't compare it.
Where I come from, Dundee, which was a fighting town, right? Industrial, working class, and it produced a lot of pro boxers. Right, and there was a guy, a lovely man called Freddie Tennant, who, Freddie, I wish I'd got his record, but he certainly boxed more than 150 times. And he was a big draw in London at places like York Hall and Bethnal Green and these venues.
Was he? Yeah.
Because he was such a crowd pleaser, is what they called him at the time. Now, Freddie told me once, because he used to, in later years, he worked in the Turkish bath as the attendant with the towels and all that. And Freddie he would come to the gym and watch us training and sparring and so on. And Freddie, his brother Norman boxed for the British flyweight title against a guy called Terry Allen. Some of the older viewers might remember Terry Allen, the London fighter, the British flyweight champion. But Freddie... Now, this is how tough it was. We're talking about the 1930s and the poverty and the unemployment. Freddie would walk the boxing booths. Have you heard of the boxing booths? They would travel with the fairground.
That's right, yeah.
And a guy would go up and we'd have maybe 4, 5, 6 boxers. Guys like Benny Lynch, who became the world flyweight champion, one of the greats of boxing. He would be there in the early days. And they would take on all comers, and they would get paid, and you get a flyweight against a middleweight kind of thing, a farmer who'd come down and think, fancy his chances. Freddie would walk 16, 18 miles from Dundee to places like Forfar, Blairgowrie, Perth, round about that area, to get a fight in the booth and get some money. So, how tough was that? Jack Dempsey went to the mines and to challenge the miners and get money, get paid for it. So you've got all that background. That's the kind of real meaning of boxing. Now it's mega, it's super wealthy and so on, but it's still mixed up. Boxing, at the highest level is still mixed up. And you look at what's happening with the governing bodies, and we don't know where we are these days. But Sugar Ray, I trained with Sugar Ray.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, there's the picture. I've seen the picture on the pitch, right?
Oh no, well, I'll tell you what happened there. So I was Walter McGuinness's sparring partner, and he said to me one weekend, he had a fight coming up in about 10, 12 days' time, and he said, come down to St. Cuthbert's Church Hall next weekend rather than the gym. He had a gym in his house, the blooming mansion. And I said, why? He said, just come down. So I went down there. We went to St. Cuthbert's Church Hall. I didn't know what to expect, but what I didn't expect was that Church Hall had been fully decked out, full-size ring, punch bags, floor-to-ceiling balls, the whole bit, and an audience around the perimeter of the hall. I thought, that's good. And a little audience at sparring helps you, raises your game. You want to show off a bit, And so I'm putting on my wraps, bandages as we called them. You get them, crepe bandages out the chemist. And I'm 18, putting them on. The door to, there was only 4 of us invited to train. I was there because I needed to spar with McGowan. And the door to my left opens, I turn like this, and it's Sugar Ray Robinson. And George Gainsford, his manager, stroke coach. And a guy called Milo Cahoon, who was his sparring partner, travelled all over the world with him. And then it clicked. Robinson was on this bill on the Thursday night. This was on the Sunday and the Thursday in Paisley Ice Rink. The fight was at, and Robinson was boxing a guy called Mick Leahy, who was a British middleweight champion. Mick Leahy was an all-out fighter, but not in the same league as Robinson. Robinson was 43, and he'd spent about 9 months in Europe boxing, literally every week or every 10 days, so on, to get money to pay a taxman back in the States. Robinson walks in, and I think, well, am I dreaming? And he had a black mohair suit on, collar and tie, you know, he looked unbelievable. And of course, you've got this, it's like, you know, if you're an Elvis fan, you like meeting Elvis, I guess, same scenario. In he walks, and he comes up to me, puts his arm around me, he said, "Hi, I'm Ray Ronald." I said, "Yeah, I know who you are." And he said, "What's your name?" And I told him, "Oh, what do you weigh and what have you got there?" So maybe about 30 seconds. And I'm gibbering. And then we go into the gym. He's on one bag here, and I'm on the one next to him, and punching away and all that. And then he goes and spars, and I spar with McGowan. Now, I recounted that story not so long ago online, and I got a message from Milo Cahoon's son. And he said, "You met my dad?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "How, you know?" And I said, "Well, he was the Commonwealth middleweight champion. He was, you know, he was a very good boxer and so on. Lovely man and so on. But, you know, he travelled the world as Sugar Ray sparring partner." And I think, what an exhibition that was. And of course, I couldn't keep my eyes off Robinson when he was sparring.
Right.
He was 43. He retired the following year.
Right. Was he still? Could he still move and stuff? He still looked great then. Yeah. He still did his thing. Because what you see sometimes with older fighters, they get a bit of a beer belly on, don't they? They become a bit of a plodder.
No,
he wasn't. He didn't turn into that.
You know, but because he trained all the time.
Did he? Yeah.
And he fought all the time. So I guess you might say that there wasn't time for him to train so much in between fights at that point.
Because he's fighting. So it's a bit like, you know, the Thai fighters in Muay Thai. You go to Thailand, they've got like that culture. Like they fight a lot to feed the family, type of deal. So they can't afford to be bashing themselves up in the gym, right? Because they're fighting at the weekend or every couple of weeks or whatever it may be. But I'll tell you what comes to my mind when you're saying that is, my granddad told a story a bit like that. Not training with him, but he saw Sonny Liston when Sonny Liston was in his prime in London, came over, did an exhibition at the Royal Albert Hall.
Yes.
And he also said as well, like back in them days, like the heavyweight champion of the world was like king of the world, right? It was the biggest sports star sort of around.
The biggest name in sport, heavyweight champion.
And he said he saw him train up close. And I think he said it was a couple of years before he'd lost to Muhammad Ali. And he said like he couldn't see how anyone would beat this man at that point. Do you know what I mean? Because he was like, he had legs like that. He was like mean demeanour, all that kind of stuff. But the interesting thing is, you listen to people talk about Sonny Liston that knew him, like online, obviously. They say he was a sweet guy. He was a nice guy. He was like a very sort of gentle and whatever. But the reason I bring him up is like when we go back to the old school training. If you watch some of the way Sonny Liston trained, there's no sort of scientific element to that, right?
No,
he's standing in front of a bag, thumping it, and there's pictures of him that people clown online, where he's literally like he's got his hand down here, his chin's completely up in the air, but he was heavyweight champion of the world.
But Ollie, but you'll see that with any fight.
Of course you will. Exactly, that's my point.
Any picture you see, you'll see that for that instant they're unguarded.
And that's the way to punch, right? In terms of that's how you get a lot of power to it, right?
Sure.
You're not going to have hands up and right.
All this stuff, you know.
But it goes back to my point about like what we call the PE teachers, right?
Yes.
You look at that as wrong, whereas it's like it ain't wrong. He was heavyweight champion of the world. Just, you know what I mean?
Well, that's right. I saw him. It must have been at the same time when he came to the UK. He came up again to Paisley Ice Rink.
Did he? Okay.
And he boxed. He boxed a few rounds with sparring partners and so on. It was a bit kind of underwhelming, because he was just going through the motions. And he did his famous skipping to Sweet Georgia Brown. That was the tune they used to, and he would skip to Sweet Georgia Brown. And that. But people were in awe of him. Yeah. But you say he was a nice guy. Well, I'll tell you, there's a great story. The promoter of those shows in Paisley Ice Rink was a guy called Peter Keenan, who had been the British, Commonwealth and European bantamweight champion in the 50s. Brilliant boxer, beaten for the world title in South Africa. So he was a little guy, Peter, and he was very ebullient and charismatic, you know, typical Glasgow, yeah, we'll do this, we'll do that. But he was very likeable. I got to know him later. In fact, he asked me to turn pro. That's another story. And the story is that after the exhibition in Paisley Ice Rink, he was the promoter. He and some guys, including Liston, went off to a party in a Glasgow tower block, right? And at one point during the night, Keenan was alerted to the fact that Liston was arguing with one of the other guests, and it was getting a bit heated and so on. And they were on the 12th floor. And Keenan, who's 5'5", went over to Liston and he said, "If I get any more of that from you," he said, "you're going out, and you're going out through that window." He said, "And I'll throw you out through the window and all that." And apparently Liston, who's a beast of a man, he just burst out laughing, you know, and went, "Yeah, sure." You know, and so it was all good nature.
Yeah.
But so you get these stories over time. Keenan was a fascinating character who was probably the first guy to start promoting his own shows, but he did it under the radar because under a British Boxing Board of Control rules, boxer couldn't promote, a manager couldn't promote, had to be a promoter. It was all kind of separate: promoter, manager, coach, boxer. It was all kind of demarcation. But Keenan, on one of his fights against a guy called Jake Tooley, who was a South African, for the Commonwealth title, I think it was, in Glasgow at Firhill Stadium, which is the home of Partick Thistle Football Club, 30,000 people. 30,000 people packed in. But in the weeks running up to that, he was unhappy with the marketing, the PR of the promotion, and it wasn't, the tickets weren't going. So he said to the promoter, "Look, I'll take it on, you know, but it has to be under the radar." He took it on, he did all the PR, all the preamble stuff, the fight, and it sold out. But apparently, and it's true actually, it's not apparent, it's a true story. Keenan would box Tooley, great fighter, come back at the end of each round, and his coach is saying, "Right, and Keenan's looking to see how many empty seats there are, and is the ringside full up, and you know, have I made money here?" And he made money from the promotion as well as from the fight. So these are fabulous characters in boxing, you know, and he was a special guy.
Yeah, well, you do come up against that in boxing, even at low level. Like you see people that are big characters. Boxing does bring big characters, doesn't it? You know what I mean? And there's definitely, I mean, as hard as it can be in a boxing club, there's definitely a buzz about a boxing club where it's like, it brings you in, doesn't it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's something to it that makes you want to keep going back because, you know, I don't know about yourself, but like there's definitely times you leave the boxing gym, you're tired, you're like, "I've had enough of this. I don't want to do this anymore." I don't want to do
I know.
But then by the next morning you're up, you go on your 5 miler, and you're back in the habit, you know, and
that's
it's a big
the
circle.
part of boxing I love.
Yeah.
You see, the grassroots bit. I've no time for the professional
Right, okay.
ring in terms of the corruption. There is corruption, you know, and some ridiculous scenarios. I mean, I think these crossover fights that we've seen are just ludicrous. You know, Fury fighting Ngannou and Jake Paul in the ring with Joshua and all that. Okay, we know why it's done, for the money. But it doesn't do anything to enhance the sport. And so, and you've got these guys, you know, the big-time promoters who are, in my view, are being in some ways dishonest in terms of, you know, not being honest with why they're doing stuff.
Right.
You know, and I think that's where I lose contact with boxing when it comes to the big promotions and the crossover fights and the fact that things are being staged simply for money and not because a boxer merits a chance, for example, at a world title. You know, so you've got all these these guys who are in the rankings, you know, and it used to be that you would eventually work your way up or not and get your opportunity. But now it's these guys are working. Look at Benavidez. You know how everybody's trying to dodge him because he's just remarkable.
Yeah. Do you think that the 4 belts is an issue, like the 4 world champions in the same division?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's. Well, we know why it's done.
Right.
Because the money that they get to sanction.
Sanctioning fees.
So
and all that,
if you're boxing for 4 belts, you've got to pay each of the organisations a heap of money, and you think, well, why?
And you lose one after anyway because you can't keep up with the mandatories because they've all got different mandatories.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So I think we need boxing needs a. You know what's happening now with Turki Al Sheikh and Zuffa boxing. May not be the answer, but they're trying to find an answer. And I don't know if it's going to work, whether the other sanctioning bodies will eventually step away. And you've got guys like Crawford and Shakur Stevenson saying, I'm not paying that.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not paying that fee. Why should I?
Yeah.
You know,
right.
Does that mean that they're not world champions? Of course not. But it just means that the sanctioning body said, well, we'll take your belt away. Yeah, have the belt, fine.
Yeah. Well, I think it's once you've already won it, it's different anyway, right? Like if you're someone like Terence Crawford's a great example. Like, I know he's retired now, but let's say he hadn't. Like, we know he's the best in the world. So he's won all the belts. He doesn't need them anymore, does he? Exactly. So that's where I think it gets tricky, doesn't it? You know, because everyone wants. I know there's different opinions on how to do it and what and why and all that business, but. We all want one champion in the division, really, right? We want to know who's the best. We don't care, you know, for 4 champions, and in a lot of divisions there are 4 separate champions. They're all world champions. It's tricky, isn't it? Because you go, I want to know who the best is.
Yeah, and that's why one champion's great. And then you could have the rankings, where you could say, well, what they used to have is a final eliminator, certainly in the British Championship. The final eliminator between A and B, and he'll box for the title.
Yeah, right.
The winner will box. So we need to get back to that. We need to get back to a scenario where the public, the boxing public, recognise he's the best because he's beaten the others. Okay, there's guys coming up, and who will he fight next? Well, obviously that he should fight the number 1 contender. Oh no, he's fighting some guy who's an MMA fighter, a UFC fighter. Well, what about all the others?
Yeah, right. You know,
what are they thinking? Oh, why am I bothering?
Well, people as well, like Dylan White comes to mind. He was like mandatory for about 3 years at one point, I think, when he didn't get his fight, you know, it never goes. But I tell you, do you know Radio Raheem? Do you know Radio Raheem?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Radio Raheem, shout out, a good friend of mine. He's been on, we was talking about before possible ways and, you know, just spouting ideas. And one way was if the sort of regional titles had more relevance. So, for example, like there's a European champion, it's a big deal, but if it was more relevant in terms of like you had an African champion of Asia, champion of North America, South America, and made that sort of a big deal, so the world champion's sort of a step above all that. Do you know what I mean? Versus having 4 champions.
That's right.
And there's problems with that, obviously, too. You know, people won't get a shot because, you know, if you're this champion, you might not have to wait 4 years. There's a lot of problems with that too. But I feel like it would be a step in some ways in the right direction, right? Because one champion matters to me. You know what I mean?
It does.
Who's the best? Muhammad Ali was heavyweight champion of the world in his day, right? And that was undisputed. But until WBC, WBA, IBF, WBO now.
Well, you're talking about the heavyweights, right? I'm critical of the heavyweights because for me the heavyweights are big guys who, generally speaking, have big punches, but and all the kind of attention is on the heavyweights, but in no way are they the most proficient boxers.
No, they can't be, can they, because of the size of the body?
Because they're huge. Yeah. But you mentioned Muhammad Ali. You know, you look at who was around Ali at the time: Ron Lyle, Ken Norton, George Foreman, Joe Frazier, all these guys. But now we've got, all right, who do we get? Oh, I'll get so-and-so to fight Fury, or get Usyk to fight. But he's already beaten twice. Daniel Dubois, but he's been beaten twice. You know, it's like, so let's give somebody else a turn. But if you look at the heavyweight division, in my view, the talent isn't there. Right. If you look below Usyk and Fury, if you like, I'm not a big fan of Fury's, but if you look below that level, who is there? And you know, I think, well, not in the same league. No, you shouldn't be allowed to even think of some of these guys in the league of Ali, Norton, Lyle, Frazier, Foreman. It's just that's same with the middleweights largely. You know, if you look at the Hearns, Hagler, Leonard, and Duran era, you think, you know, they would destroy the middleweights around today.
It's funny, because there is an element of like we've got our favourites, right? Like who you grew up with and you watch and you go there, but there's truth to that too, isn't there? Like what you're saying with the heavyweight division. I wonder if some of that is like also unaware of it in terms of because we see the big stars and whatnot. But also, I tell you, how good's Usyk in your opinion? How good do you feel Usyk is sort of historically if he went back in time? Could he mix it?
Right. There's two things about Usyk. First thing I must say is he's a wonderful world champion and a genuine man. And I think that the two must go hand in hand.
Right.
For me, the world champion, a heavyweight champion, I think you said earlier on, it was the biggest prize in sport.
Right.
Right, so these guys would go on TV, they'd be on chat shows, they'd be interviewed and so on. It was that important. Now, of course, the world of sport has changed. Now we've got multi-millionaire Premier League footballers, we've got the NFL, we've got the basketball people, all coming through. So, if you like, it's less important to be the heavyweight champion of the world. But if you look at Usyk today, how would he fare against, for example, the ones I've mentioned? Ali, Norton, Frazier, Foreman, and Lyle. Yeah. How would he fare? I leave that question open there. I'm not convinced he would. I think he's a wonderful fighter. I think the thing I like about him, especially for a big man, he's got the hand speed, and he's got the mobility, and he's got the brain power. So I think that makes him head and shoulders, as he's shown, above the others in the division.
Yeah.
Head and shoulders above.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what's interesting as well. People always talk about how small he is, right? Now, if you've seen him in person, right? Yeah. He's not a small man, is he? He's a great big guy, right? He's 6 foot, 304 kilos, I think, at his last weigh-in.
Yeah.
So, to me, he's almost like he's the right size too, because I do think there's an element you can be too big as well. Do you know what I mean? You can be like what you touched on earlier. They're not as efficient. But you can't be like it's obvious. 6'3" man who weighs 100 kilos can't move like Sugar Ray Robinson could in his day. Obviously, right? No. Physics of it. There's other the power he'll have. Yeah. You can't compare. On and on. But I feel like he's the right size to be able to move enough, do everything right, and he's great, right? In terms of this era, I don't think you can dispute he's the best now, right? He's because he's beat everyone, most of them twice. Do you know
and
he
reads the fight brilliantly,
right? And his brain's on and switched on. And like when you go back in history, you can only be great for your time as well, right? Like because Muhammad Ali had all the great fighters around him to rise to the top of that. Like him having, everyone says it, him having Joe Frazier and all the guys you mentioned, that made him better too, right? Because he had that kind of competition. Like if you're in a
sorry to interrupt you, but and they were beating him,
right?
And he was coming back.
He came back.
They were hitting him, putting him down.
Yeah,
and he was getting up and coming back.
That's the mark of a champion too, to me as well. And I tell you one of my big heroes in boxing, Roy Jones Jr. Is like people used to say he was no good because he had no one to fight, but I think he's a case of like he was just so far ahead of the competition. It looks like he got no one to fight, right? He was, to me, was like if you watch what he did to James Toney in his day, like James Toney was another truly great fighter, right? Sure. And it goes on and on, but it's hard because I've heard a famous UFC fighter, George St. Pierre, I don't know if you're aware of who he is. He was a world champion in the UFC. And he said it's like, if you look at Usain Bolt as a sprinter, you can compare him to other guys. We know, it's on paper, he was the best because you can see it. Whereas boxing, it's like, or fighting in general, it's like, we can't because it's only opinion. It's only ever going to be an opinion, isn't it?
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. So it's easy to pluck names out of the air and say, well, he beat him, but you can't tell.
Right.
You can't tell. And also, and one of the reasons you can't tell is, well, you take the great Gene Tunney, who was a heavyweight champion, who beat Dempsey twice. Yeah. And Tunney was an artist for a heavyweight, right? We're talking about smaller heavyweights now. And he was a great ring artist, he was a great tactician, and he was a great technician. But who gave him a real hiding? Harry Greb.
Harry Greb, middleweight, yeah.
Middleweight,
Yeah.
right? And so that kind of backs up what we're just saying there. You can never tell.
No.
And Harry Greb's a middleweight, but he's one of these guys you would need a claw hammer in each hand to try and stop him coming forward.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like for like is really difficult. All you've got to go on is looking at the ability of one fighter and the ability of the other, and try and match up.
Try and make it as best you can. And it's also on any given night too, right? Like, if me and you, we're the same age, the same weight, and we box, I don't know, I'm tired, whatever, blah, blah, you're on your best form, then then we fight again and this role's reversed. No one sees that side of the game, do they? Do you know what I mean?
And the other thing that comes into play is nerves.
Yeah, right.
So you go into, I don't care what anybody says, everybody gets nervous, you know. And I almost stop, not quite, at using the word fear, because you're thinking, wow, can this guy hurt me? You know, I've watched, I didn't have when I boxed as an amateur, we didn't have videos that we could look at as a guy. You just it's a journey into the unknown.
Right.
And you look at the guy and think, wow, he's good. I used to get like that. Good, and you haven't seen him, but you're just looking at him and thinking, he's good. I used to get like that when I boxed. The first time I boxed at the Albert Hall in London, Scotland against England, which would have been 1964. And I'm sitting there, and I've got what I call a resting face. I'm not a great smiler. And I'm sitting there waiting to go in the ring, you know, and we're all in the changing room. And the guy who was the trainer, a guy called Charlie Kerr, who used to go with the Scotland team, he must have seen something. And he comes over and he sits down and he said, "You okay?" And I said, "I'm fine." He said, "You know this guy you're boxing has just got 2 arms, 2 hands, 2 legs, just like you." And later on, when I thought about it, I thought, well, maybe not. Maybe he's a brilliant boxer, you know. That's the difference. Maybe he's got a better brain than me. And it was a guy called Dougie Waite from Battersea. And I was always, I was sometimes disadvantaged because flyweight was John McCluskey, the ABA, twice ABA champion, went on to become the British flyweight professional champion. Bobby Mallon, twice ABA champion. Featherweight Ken Buchanan, we all know what he did. Then there was me. So we were generally 3-0 up before we were. And I remember once a guy said to me, one of the Scotland officials, he said, "You know you're going to have to knock this guy out to win." Not this guy Dougie Waite, this is another contest. And I said, "Why?" He says, "Because they're 3-0 up. We're 3-0 up. They're not going to allow this to continue."
Right.
So I go in and I box this guy down. So the Charlie Kerr says to me, "Well, you're looking a bit nervous." I said, "Yeah, I'm nervous." So 6,000-7,000 people in the Albert Hall, and it's live on the BBC, and it's atmospheric and it's exciting. But I'm worried. I'm thinking, this guy, look at him. He's in his white vest and white shorts for the England team. You always thought, oh, England team, they were special, you know. And he beat me on the majority decision. And I thought, blooming heck. Fortunately, Harry Carpenter, who was the commentator, famous commentator, he had said, I was told later, because we don't have video evidence, he had said, that's another win for Scotland, before they came to the decision. But you're at the vagaries of judging and so on. Anyway, and so that was that it must have shown on my face, but that's the way I am generally. I'm a miserable looking guy, you know, and why don't you smile? Well, I'm actually pretty worried this guy's going to beat me.
It's funny, and you had you said earlier, like 200 bouts. Still nervous for all of them. Still nervous at the end as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Never goes away.
I could pick out 2 or 3 times when I didn't have one nerve in my body, but only 2 or 3 times where I was just totally relaxed. I can't understand. I can't explain why that should be. I'm thinking, right, I'm feeling good tonight. You know, I'm in the mood, and I think sometimes guys brought better things out of me. Sometimes opponents, you know, certainly the thinkers, and I think, well, I could outthink him. That was my style. But listen, you never know. I remember one guy I boxed, it was a southpaw, and he kept hitting me in the chest with left crosses, bang, But I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to cave my chest in here, you know. And I went back, my trainer said, what are you playing at? I said, what? I said, he's hitting me in the chest. All night. Yeah, okay. You need to do this and you need to do that. And go out there and, you know, throw 3-4 punch combinations. And I did. And I stopped him the next round. But that's the thing, going back to trainers and coaches, that's what we forget. Mm-hmm. Part of the thing they're there to do when you're in the ring is to spot your flaws and to spot your opponent's flaws.
Right.
I said, right, he's doing this. You watch it every time he pulls back, you hit him, you know, and you get little insights. I'm not convinced you get that with all of the trainers these days who concentrate more. Maybe I'm being wrong. Certainly concentrate a great deal on attacking. You know, come on, get in there, battle it. Not. He's throwing his jab and he's dropping it every time. So watch out for that and cross, you know.
Right.
I got it from my dad once in my first Scottish Championships. My dad was at the ringside, just as a member of the audience. And I boxed this guy, much taller. And at the end of the round, I came back and I looked out like that and my dad went, cross. I went, okay, came out, bang. And that was,
yeah.
You know, and I thought, wow, that was good. I wish I had him at the ringside every time.
But it's funny, simple instructions go a long way too, because that's another thing that, you know, you see sometimes at shows when you're there and you're close enough to the cornerman to hear what's coming out. He's giving him 6 different instructions, and you're like, he's got a lot going on in his head, right? He's getting punched, he's tired, and it's like you're telling him, right, move this way, left hook, move that way. When he does, it's like, whoa. He can't. He can't take that on.
You're right. It's meaningless, right?
Yeah.
I had a couple of guys down sparring in Hamilton the other week, and in Dundee, and other coaches are like that constantly. Do this, go, jab, go. No, you're just cramming his brain with stuff that he can't take in.
And it can be an irritant too. When you're boxing,
exactly.
It's like, you're a bit like...
Yeah, and you hear
enough.
it. You know where you hear it?
Yeah.
With the dads.
Dads is worse.
Dads is bad. Go on, Kevin, get in there. Go on, do this. I think you feel like saying, just calm down. Yeah. You're doing the guy no good whatsoever.
You're hurting him more than anything. You're distracting him. There's a whole thing. I've been at shows as well, and I remember distinctly being at one. I'd boxed. I was probably 18 at the time, but there was a kid on the card who was about 30. You know, a kid, right?
Yeah.
And I remember his dad going, "Go forward, go forward." And, you know, you're like, kind of instructions that? What's he supposed to do with that?
Go get forward. Punch in the face.
Unbelievable. Yeah. But you know, you do see it and stuff like that. But I tell you one you was around a lot by the sound of it was Ken Buchanan. How good was he in person? How good was he?
Yeah, Buchanan was right. Buchanan was exceptional in as much as he had a good engine, right? Buchanan would fight 15 rounds, no problem.
Right, okay.
I remember there were 15-round contests in the title fights in those days. In the British title, if anybody looked at Buchanan's fight with Jim Watt, for example, the British lightweight title, it was an exceptional fight. And at the end of it, and Jim Watt, a fabulous fighter and a big puncher, and at the end of it, both these guys were doing what they did in the earlier rounds. Which was remarkable. Buchanan had this fantastic energy, and he had the most perfect jab, long. He had a long left jab. I boxed him featherweight, and he just found it hard to get past that jab, and that was his main part of his armory. And what I liked about Buchanan is he never forgot that. So the jab was always number one, right? Everything else would come behind that. But even at the end of the fight, he would be on the end of that jab, constant. The energy, the gas that he had was incredible. He never ran out of steam. And I think the bad thing about Buchanan was that he was from Edinburgh, and Edinburgh was not interested in boxing. If he'd been a Glaswegian like Jim Watt, who was fated, and everywhere he went, because it was a boxing town, he'd have been a different fighter. But Buchanan went on and on. Of course, inevitably he went on too long, and in the end he was boxing unlicensed fights.
Was he? Okay.
It was a pity what happened to him, but then we've heard this story so many times in boxing, where they get all the money and they think this is going great, let's buy that, let's get a Jaguar, let's buy a pub, all that stuff, and then suddenly it disappears, and they have to keep fighting. And that's the
It's sad, isn't it, when you see that? Because Duran famously said once when he was asked who was the toughest opponent he ever faced, he said Buchanan. It was in his career, so he went on after, he might have changed his opinion, I don't know. But he said at one point, like, Buchanan was the toughest person he'd fought, which is...
Well, he was tough. I mean, and that's the other thing. Again, talk about the great champions and great chins. Right, Buchanan was, before that fight was stopped in the 13th round, when Duran hit him low. Buchanan was still, he was behind. No way he would have won it.
But multiple times as well, Duran hit him low, didn't he? He kept hitting him low. It was a few times, more than once. It was more than once.
And he hit him after the bell as well.
Yeah.
But Buchanan was still in there fighting. You know, it was that was the great thing about him. I mean, apart from his obvious ability, and the fact that he went and won that title abroad, the world title. He defended it again abroad in Madison Square Garden then before he lost it eventually to Duran. But Duran was exceptional, of course, and you wouldn't want to fight him. You would need a kind of machine gun to fight him. He was fantastic. And I've met him a couple of times.
Have you?
Yeah. He doesn't speak any English. His son travels with him and he's his translator. But you think of the punishment these guys took.
Yeah. Well, Duran as well. Duran was still fighting at world level at like 50, wasn't he? He still kept going up the weights and didn't stop.
Yeah, to go through, and he's not a big guy.
No.
So he goes through from lightweight, welterweight, middleweight, and he's going on in between.
Yeah. Super middle he ended up, I think, didn't he? I think he actually won a version of a title with super middle.
Yeah. I think, how did you do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But crazy how these guys go, especially like his upbringing, like Duran. You hear about him; he was like selling donuts on the street at like 5.
But that's the story of the lives of many fighters. You know, the poverty thing, the hungry fighter. So the guy that needs to box to get money to put food on the table, which is, and it's still the same today.
Different motivation, that, isn't it? When you need it, when you that's your primary source of income. That's a different.
And you've got a family to feed.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm getting
like going back to my Freddie Tennant story. I'll walk 20 miles to get a fight because we need to get a meal on the table.
Mental. When you hear that, it's all right to say, you walk 20 miles, but then stop and think about that. Yes. Walking 20 miles.
I know.
Yeah.
So I don't know how long that would take you, but certainly take the best part of a day.
All day, yeah. You're walking all day.
And then you've got guys like who are in the boxing booths, who would travel with the boxing booths, the resident fighters taking on all comers. They would sleep with the horses.
Yeah, madness.
In these horse-drawn caravans. And they're sleeping. I'm thinking, that's how bad it was.
Yeah.
You have to be special to box in these circumstances.
That's a different thing, isn't it? Yeah, than an ordinary person who's working in a bank or something. You can't compute the two together, can you? But I tell you, before we finish up, 2 questions I wanted to ask you about historical in terms of boxing. Firstly, pound for pound, and secondly, I'll ask you heavyweight. But who, all time, I think I know the answer to this one, that's why I'm asking it first. Who's the best pound for pound boxer of all time to you?
Well, for me, and I'm not alone in this, I mean, it's easy for me to say because everybody else, guys like Teddy Atlas, guys like Muhammad Ali, and so many kind of top-level champions have said the same thing, Sugar Ray Robinson. Now, Sugar Ray won the world welterweight title 5 times, middleweight title 5 times. He was the welterweight champion. He had, I think, an 85 unbeaten run as an amateur, Golden Gloves champion, and so on. But he had everything.
Drew for the light heavyweight title as well, didn't he? He nearly became a light heavyweight.
He came within a whisker. It was the hottest night on record in New York City. And he just couldn't go on. He was miles ahead against a guy called Joey Maxim.
That's it.
And at the end of the 13th round, miles ahead, he just couldn't
get off the stool.
Couldn't get off his stool.
Yeah.
So Sugar Ray Robinson was special with so many of them. Even at the lighter weights, if you look back at the records, guys like Jimmy Wild from Wales, the flyweight champion, Benny Lynch, Willie Pep.
Willie Pep's
Now,
another
Willie
one, yeah.
Pep was a kind of miniature Sugar Ray Robinson in terms of his style. Wonderful, beautiful fluency, footwork, the left jab, the slipping. Henry Armstrong.
I was going to say, that's one that no one gives any love to. 3-weight champion in the days when it was like, again, one champion,
That's
not
right.
undisputed.
And no kind of middleweights, junior.
Yeah, no junior
or
division, super division.
It
So he was skipping properly.
Yeah.
I think it was featherweight, welterweight, or featherweight, lightweight, welterweight.
Yes,
Was that right?
that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like there's big jumps in there.
Oh,
Do you know what I mean? And especially in them days, there's no sports science where they're cutting weight. Like if you was a featherweight, you was just a featherweight, right?
That's right.
So you're not against a featherweight, a natural featherweight to a natural welterweight. This is
exactly
a big difference,
It's a
isn't it? In
huge
terms of,
jump.
And
Yeah.
you're talking about elite level, the number one in the world, which is
That's
insane.
right.
Yeah.
And the fact is they didn't dodge anybody.
No.
These guys fought whoever they were told to fight, right?
Right.
He was the number one contender.
His next fight, him, end of
that's
story.
your next fight.
Yeah.
And he did it within 3 months. So if you won the title if you were challenging for a title and you won it, then there'd be a clause in the contract you had to give this guy a return within 3 months.
Whoa. Within 3 months.
3
which is
months.
good. And I'll tell you what, with Henry Armstrong as well, I believe, did he draw for the middleweight title as well? He nearly
did.
became fourth.
He did,
nearly
and he
got
was
fourth.
robbed.
Yeah, he was
Yeah.
robbed for the middleweight title
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
And like, listen, anyone's been around a middleweight boxer, that ain't small, is it? That's a fairly big guy. That's pretty lumpy.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And so he's worth watching.
Yeah.
Willie Pep, Henry Armstrong, these guys are worth watching.
Yeah.
Jimmy Wild, you probably won't see any video of him because it's so far back. But Benny Lynch, if you look at him and think, well, it's pretty primitive. But he could punch like a featherweight. He was a flyweight.
Right, yeah.
He was knocking people all, still, again, from the Gorbals area of Glasgow, extremely poor. Management wasn't so great. And he became an alcoholic. He was dead at 33.
Right. 33.
Yeah.
Oof. Young, isn't it? It's really young to be gone.
Yeah.
Man. I'll tell you, all right, let's go heavyweight division. I might know this answer too, but who's, in your opinion, the best heavyweight of all time?
Well, I think you've got to say, again, it's hard. We spoke about this earlier. It's hard to do like for like. I think you've got to say Muhammad Ali, probably because he boxed like a middleweight. Now, if you look at the hand speed and the footwork of Ali, that's what picks him out from the others. You know, they weren't plodders. However, you've got guys like Gene Tunney, Dempsey, but none of the current crop of heavyweights would touch these guys, in my view. Ali was a beautiful athlete and extremely confident. Like many of the purists, I didn't like what he was doing in his early career, in fact, in terms of the boasting and what he was going to do, I'm going to knock you out and so on. But then you realise a lot of it was a bit fun. However, what we've got now is you've got the copycats.
Yeah, right.
And it's not fun.
No, comes off silly, doesn't it, when it's
vile.
that? Yeah, right.
It's actually vile, and that's one of the big things I hate about boxing. Yeah, I'm going to kill you, and you're going, oh, you fight, you know, that kind of. Get over it, you know. Come together, get your picture taken, shake hands, and go back to your hotel and get a rest before you fight that night.
it.
And in those days, you remember, Ollie, you must remember that the weigh-ins were that morning, and they fought that night. None of this kind of day before, and you can go and feed up and put on, I don't know, you can put on half a stone.
Yeah, at least. Some guys put on a lot more,
yeah,
don't they? Some guys with like hydration. They said about Canelo. I think Canelo in one of his fights put on 16 pounds.
Yes.
You know, which is insane amount of weight. Insane amount of weight, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Crazy.
But it is what it is.
Yeah.
But Frank, this is always brilliant to talk
Great-
to you, mate.
great
And
to
here's
see
to
you.
many more as the years go on. Hopefully, we get more chances to do it, mate. I know the answer to this question, but I always finish by asking which football team you support. Let me down again, mate. Which football team do you support?
Listen, do you want to get my engagement finished overnight by the other team supporter? I'm not going to go down. I'm scared. So if I say one team, the other teams will say, I knew he was a supporter. I'm not going to go.
We're not going there.
You've tried it before.
I tried you before. I can't get
Get out
it
of
again.
here.
Correct answer is Chelsea. I don't know. But Frank, brilliant.
Great to
Always,
see
mate.
you.
I always finish with a fist up like this. Squeeze the neck. Boom!
Squeeze the neck.
Hey.
Boom. That